What is up, everyone, and welcome to The Shell Part 3, Paradiso. It's finally here, the third and final entry into the Shell series. I am very, very excited for it. I haven't heard too much about it. I haven't heard anything about this new version anyway. Obviously, playing through the first two, people have kind of talked about their opinions on the third as well, but I haven't heard too many people actually talk about the recent release, this new remaster. But I am looking forward to it. I'm looking forward just to see how this story concludes. I am very interested, to say the least. For those of you who haven't, for some reason, watched part 1 or part 2, our basic recap up to where this story is beginning, right? The long and short of it, right? Ureji, our main character, right? He pipes down a high schooler. He falls in love with a high schooler, pipes her down, gets her pregnant. She dies, but she gives birth. And that's his baby. But he didn't realize that she had a baby. And then the second game, he found out he had a baby. But it was too late. The baby done got baby napped by an old friend of his new co-worker, essentially, right? So this story is essentially the quest to find the baby, is my assumption. To find this guy and the baby and wrap everything all up in a nice little bow. So yeah, not really much more to say. Let's just jump into it, shall we? Meet the cursor screen. Yeah, it's snow. Final day of January saw snow in Tokyo, accompanying dawn's first light. Okay. Oh, are they holding like a legit funeral for her now? Since now they can confirm that she's actually dead. She's no longer missing. Okay. Well, it's because you suck. I don't give a fuck about what Chizuru's feeling. Chizuru Chiki, clad in a black kimono, broke the silence with that solemn admission. God damn. Everyone's standing around being quiet and you're just like, you know what? Honestly, I don't really give a shit. Jesus, you suck. Why do you feel the need to say this? Why? Says, wow, now that we've confirmed she's dead, honestly, I don't feel anything. Didn't think I would either. It's like, yeah, I knew I'm a pretty shitty mother, but damn, this really is bad, isn't it? Huh. Anyway. Goddamn, what a thing to say. I don't know, maybe say that in the privacy of your own home, when you're by yourself or, fucking your brother or some shit, I guess. Confiding to him about it, sure. I don't know who was all there. For all I know, this is just Chizuru by herself, but it really doesn't seem like it. In fact, wait. Run the backlog. Run the backlog. She broke the silence, which makes me assume there's multiple people there. At least that's my assumption, anyway. Chizuru shook her head. Jesus Christ. The deceased young woman's photo sat in her arms. The girl in the photo was looking away, a gloomy pall shrouding her countenance. It almost felt like she was trying to avoid meeting my eyes, unable to truly blame me for my failure.
結局一度もカメラに向かって笑ってはくれませんでした。
Chizuru ran her fingers down the photo's face.
やはりレンズ越しでは距離を縮められませんでした。でも直接触れ合うのは恐ろしくて。
Yeah, 'cause you suck. Chizuru's voice faded as she turned away from the photo, setting it down beside her.
朽木さん、
何でしょうか。
もし許されるのでしたら。
分骨ですか。
Though clearly baffled, Chizuru nodded all the same.
ありがとうございます。
Yeah, Rage, you're still fucking weird. It's like, I know this game doesn't have any sex scenes in it. That's something people have talked about a bit, like how it's like the only one that doesn't. But, you know, Reiji still finds a way to, like, be weird about it. I don't think the request itself is weird. I just think the way he said it. And like just how grateful he appears to be. Thank you so much. It's like, what? Reiji? Like, maybe I'm just hearing things. Let's run.
ありがとうございます。
Like, okay, maybe I'm reading into a bit too much. It is more so he's just like whispering it, being quiet, I suppose. But it's like,
もし許されるのでしたら、トウコさんが帰ってきた際にありがとうございます。
I don't like the way he said that. I just don't like the way he said that. Seems like he was too into it. There was some place I wanted to take her. Or rather, someplace I wanted to return her to.
それでは
And that's nice in theory, of course. That's totally fine. It's just the way you said it. Chizuru bowed and passed me by. All that was left was Toko's photo. Her melodious voice would grace my ears no more. Never again would she smile, weep, or draw. That lone photo hammered that harsh reality in deeper than words ever could. I'd been prepared for this outcome long ago. Or at least I thought I had. The two of us had only known each other for a little more than a month. Yeah, I know. That's why the whole premise of this fucking series is so fucking wacky. Honestly, I think that's why I like part 2 as much as I do, because it, like, Toko's, like, in the background, like, it does eventually tie back into her case, right? But, like, it's not really focused on her. There's a whole other story going on that eventually ties back into Toko and what goes on with her. But I think I like part 2 because it just kind of, like, for the most part, it detaches away from Toko. Because otherwise, Reiji's obsession with Toko is just weird. It just is. He fell in love with a teenager in a month. Not like any kind of time would make that better, right? But like, you know, even if she wasn't a teenager, right? Even if she was a grown-ass woman, he knew her for a month. And now it's like, oh, she was so important to me. It's like, motherfucker, like, did we see him this mournful for his actual fiance who had died prior? The person I assume he had known longer than a month and had spent a significant amount of time with? Because Jesus Christ. To put this high schooler ahead of even that, you're more mournful. I get it, this is much more recent, sure, but it's like, ugh. I don't know, now that Toko's back in like the forefront of the story, just once again weirds me out that Reiji is the way he is. And yet, in spite of that, her absence had opened a gaping hole in my heart that consumed me over the years that had followed. I knew, as the survivor, all I could do to make it up to her was bear the weight of the life she'd lost until the end of my days. And yet, my body refused to take action despite the howls of my soul. Thus I remained seated on the veranda, staring at her photo. Her smile not only lived on in my memories. I gripped the edge of the veranda. Frayed splinters dug into my fingertips. However, I only gripped harder, for I feared I would collapse so much as let go. Toko's loss had reduced me to nothing but a hollow shell. He said shell. Oh, it's a shell. Her blades to my heart had been raised, leaving nothing but a gaping abyss behind. It's one teenager. You knew for a month. One teenager. Buddy. Could I ever fill that void? I don't know. You lost your fucking first fiance, and in a month you filled that gap with a teenager. Like, honestly, I imagine you probably could, if we're being perfectly honest. Knowing what I know about you at age, I mean, hell, you hold Toko in such high regards, but guess what? In the previous game, even though they were technically bad endings, you were more than willing to pipe down some teenagers again. Couldn't even get a Natsume pipe down in the last game. So, like, honestly, Reiji, yeah, I think you can fill that void pretty damn easily. Should I even dare to dream of filling it? Jesus Christ. Shut up. I crouched before Toko and clasped my hands together. I spoke no more than that. What could I even say to her? Any further words would have just been an excuse. What gall could I possibly have to beg for forgiveness after I'd failed her? My knees fell to the snowy ground. I gripped the rim of her photo. I had resigned myself to her death 2 years ago. And yet the obsession known as Toko Kichiki still refused to release me from its clutches. Because of the baby. There was a girl. Do I really need the recap? Alright, let's go. There was a girl named Toko Kichiki. She and I, Reiji Tokisaka, met nearly 2 years ago during the spring of 1956. She came to me with a rather bizarre job request. Find my true self. At first I dismissed it as a silly schoolgirl's prank. Unfortunately, she later got in an accident and the choice had been made to amputate her limbs to keep her alive. But it was only recently that the true reasoning behind that decision came to light. She'd been pregnant. I myself only found out about it just the other day when I discovered her body. The child's whereabouts were presently a mystery. She'd vanished alongside Naori Kuroya, the man who delivered her. The police, believing Naori had abducted her, spent the last week tearing heaven and hell apart looking for him, all while I'd sat on the sidelines. The reasoning I'd fed Yaginuma and his men for that decision was that there was only so much a lone private eye such as myself could handle on his own. Truth be told, though, I just hadn't been able to bring myself to join the manhunt. I knew I had to find the girl, of course. That was my duty. But it was, though, finally finding Toko's body had unbound me from the shackles that had held me prisoner for the past 2 years straight, leaving me immobile on the ground like an enfeebled, enervated old beggar. I was aware how odd this sounded, considering I should have known that this was the only possible way things could have ended from the moment she was taken, yeah. Still, in any case, it was only at the end of January that I finally found it in me to go back outside, albeit solely to attend Toko's memorial at the Kichiki residence. Though that being said, Toko's remains were still undergoing autopsy and had yet to be returned to her family. Regardless, the memorial was held all the same, probably not for her sake, but rather to bring closure to those she'd left behind. Yet in spite of that, such a formality had only served to deepen the hole in my chest, for it hammered home that she was never coming back. But even so, I had to move on for the baby girl she'd left behind. Otherwise, I would remain an empty shell. If I had to be honest, I doubted anything would ever replace her in my heart. But even with all that said, I couldn't afford to let this void fade away. For it also served as proof she'd once lived, and as such I had to keep marching forward to defend it. I forced myself out of my torpor and trudged over to the library. There I picked up my notebook, unyoked it from the thin coat of dust that blanketed it in my absence, and flipped through the pages. Now that I was back in the game, straightening out all the details regarding the whirlwind of incidents that come one after another starting last November took priority. Such as those concerning the Blessed Congregation, the successor of the religious organization behind ththose serial killings in Ueno years ago, known as Senri. Or the ones regarding Yukiko Kayahara, their so-called Oracle of Revelations, whom they tried to seat on their throne. She'd once killed her own friend, and as such she was currently in police custody. Fortunately, the psychiatrist who'd subsequently interviewed her and deemed she hadn't been of sound mind at the time of the murder, so she'd likely get off on the insanity plea. Still, my guess was that it would take a while to process her, meaning she probably wouldn't be seeing home anytime soon. When everything was said and done, I was no paragon of the law, nor some executor of justice. That's why I wanted to do all I could to help her out, even if she was a criminal. Though maybe that was hypocritical as hell coming from someone whose job it was to expose others' secrets. On the other hand, we had another criminal who'd recently been arrested, Nanako Sawashiro. Free my girl, she deserves better. From what I heard, she'd been upfront and cooperative in her interrogation. Capital punishment would normally be her fate, considering her crime was that of patricide, but in her case, she had plenty of rope to plead extenuating circumstances, yes. Unfortunately, she refused to do so much as say a word about Naoto Kuroi's whereabouts. That or she truly didn't know. Furthermore, there'd been no news about the baby since we discovered that cabin in the mountains. Regardless, Nanako appeared to believe she was alive and well. At the end of the day, Nanako probably considered the baby her own daughter, given that she herself was infertile. I'd be lying if I said that didn't evoke any mixed feelings. Still, circumstances aside, the fact remained that Nanako had indeed brought up the baby. I had to be grateful to her for that, if nothing else. Hell yeah, you do. Nanako is fucking great. She deserves so much better, but she definitely didn't get it. I left the library and returned to my room. Tonight was the last night of January. I covered the charcoal in the brazier with ash before crawling into my futon, drowsiness gradually creeping up on me. The night would only grow colder as it dragged on. I might not know where Naoto Kuroi has taken you, but I pray that you're warm and safe, wherever you might be. Sierra del Fuoco, Capitolo 0, Paradiso de Ron. Pretty sure it's in Italian and not French, but I still went with the French accent regardless. February 1st, 1958. First day of February was a Saturday. Thus, it was in her school uniform that Yukari approached me as I was sipping coffee in the living room.
Yukari, Shimbun wa?
Yeah, show me Yukari's new model. Hell yeah. Yukari's still cute as ever. I love her. I'd asked as casually as possible, yet Yukari looked away from me and fumbled over her words as though she was trying but failing to bring herself to say something. And just like that, she retreated to the kitchen in a fluster. What in the world's eating her?
Na, warui na.
Yukari handed me the morning paper. Yukari, perhaps confused as to why I was up so early for a change, abruptly presented me with that question.
特に予定はないが、何かあるのか?
いえ、そういうわけではないのですが、ここのところ起きるのが遅かったようですから。
まあ、な。
Scan the front page. Today's top story was about the Americans launching their own satellite in the wake of the Soviets. I had no idea what those expensive toys of theirs were for, but it seemed the wheel of progress was still turning.
そろそろ行きますね。
Yukari donned her coat and grabbed her bag.
ああ、気をつけてな。
行ってきます。
Yukari left the living room, rendering the house silent once more. She's walking on eggshells around me, isn't she? Egg what? The quiet was swiftly sundered by the sound of me flipping through the paper. Eventually, an article in the local news section caught my eye. Shinzo Mamiya passes from illness in prison. Now there was a name I could never forget. He was the man who'd inadvertently triggered the incident surrounding Toko 2 winters back. The mad artist who transformed Toko's biological mother into girl in shell. So, he's dead, is he? His revelation sparked not even the slightest of emotions in me. Frail old men and the severities of prison rarely meshed well, and he'd likely been no exception. No. Wait. I grabbed at my head. This isn't right. The news should have elicited at least some sort of response out of me. But it hadn't. Like my emotional capacity was waning. As though my emotions were flowers withering in a harrowing drought. Guess I'm falling apart at the seams. I took a sip of my ice-cold coffee. It sank its bitter fangs in my tongue, clearing my head a little. Though it had been illness that claimed him, this was still the death of a major celebrity we were talking about. Unfortunately, the article didn't get much into his death, apart from the fact that it was the work of a sickness. So while there probably hadn't been any foul play, I couldn't shake the apprehension seizing my heart, groundless as it was. I reached into my breast pocket and popped a cigarette into my mouth, only to belatedly remember I'd promised not to smoke in the house. Man, I'm really out of whack. And again, I'd been out of whack for the last week now. I jugged the rest of my coffee and folded up the newspaper. Guess I'll cool my head over a smoke. was with that thought in mind that I donned my coat, found my car keys, and left the house. I drove around with an unlit cig perched between my lips, all the while pondering the significance of Shinzo Mamiya's passing. The cases he'd been linked to were all but closed now. While he may have triggered them, he actually hadn't been responsible for any of the crimes I'd investigated. No, that didn't change the fact they never would have happened if not for him, of course. Wait, what did he do to trigger the last one? Like, the very obvious connection to... No, hold up. I can get there. Okay, so true. Because Naori ended up running into Shinzo's son, Shinji Mamiya, yeah, who had Toko and the baby. Right. Well, he had pregnant Toko, and then Naori delivered the baby. Right. So, right, if it hadn't have been for that, Naori wouldn't be where he is. We wouldn't be set on the current path we're on. So, like, yeah, it does kind of tie in there eventually. I was gonna say, like, Shinzo, he really, outside of that, he didn't really do much for that last case. Still, it wasn't to say I was of any mind to speak ill of the dead. I wouldn't bring those lost lives back, that much was certain. No, what was done was done. End of story. I found myself standing before the MPD in Sakura-Mon after coming to my senses. Well, the place to randomly end up. No, it can't be coincidence. My brain must have guided me here for a reason. Not that I had any idea what that was, of course. I had been inside ever since the case was brought to a tentative close. Partially because I'd literally had no business there, but mainly that I just hadn't felt like working. Like, what's up, fellas? At this point, I was such a regular in these halls that I could go straight up to the Criminal Investigations Division, CID, without asking for permission. Hiroshi Aginuma was there, seated away from the sea of inspector's desk like an ancient emperor taking stock of his navy.
Aginuma.
Senpai desu ka?
Aginuma pushed up the bridge of his glasses as he regarded me.
もういいんですか?
仕事をしないと飯も食えなくなるからな。
I quite literally shrugged off his inquiry the best I could.
今のところ頼めるようなことは何もありませんよ。それとも他に何か?
察しているんじゃないのか?
Unless he was keeping that copy of the morning paper wedged between a stack of documents on his desk just for show anyway.
間宮心臓の件ですか?
Aginuma retrieved the newspaper in question and opened it.
この新聞発表の通りですよ。昨日、獄中で死亡しているところを発見されました。もっとも、息子の間宮真司が遺体で発見されたということも伝えてありましたから。
Unlike Aginuma was equally indifferent to the news. And again, this was probably just another case to him, so maybe that only stood to reason.
ただ面倒なことがありましてね。これは警察の役割ではないので関係ないのですが。
なんだ?
間宮心臓の親族がいないんですよ。近しい人間は全て死亡していますし、遠い親戚でも服役中だったり。
遺産か。しかしそれでも著名な作家だったんだ。作品を売れば結構な資産になるだろうに。
資産以上に借金も多かったようですよ。ここ10年はろくに創作活動を行っていなかったようですから。
まあ確かに警察の仕事ではないな。
Sorting this out was more of a detective's job, if anything. Not that I expected the offer to come knocking at my door or anything.
ところで、黒谷直りの行方については何か分かっているか?
目下、鋭意捜索中です。
So basically, you've got zilch.
あの場所は隠れ家として使っていたことは確かでしょうが、逃走前に立ち寄っていた可能性は少ないと考えられています。
数日以内に生活していた痕跡がないからだろう。目撃情報だって1年以上前の話だった。
そういうことですよ。
So essentially, the odds they'd fled to Yamanashi were next to none. On one hand, a man his age carrying around a baby would stick out like a sore thumb. On the other, that was surely something he was perfectly aware of himself. So it's highly probable he was hiding somewhere in the city, steering clear of crowded areas like train stations. But Yaginuma was no idiot. He'd all but definitely figured all that out by now. And yet he and his boys still hadn't located Naoto Kuroya in spite of that. We're gonna need some more info if we want to have a snowball's chance in hell of finding him.
話は変わるが、ヤギ沼。司法解剖が終わった遺体はいつ帰ることになる？
僕が知るわけありませんよ。ただ彼女の場合、遺骨はこちらでダビに付すことになるでしょう。
分かっているさ。
You're gonna just send a literal bag of bones back to her family after all.
葬儀は昨日でしたか。僕はあいにく行けませんでしたが。
お前に来られたって困るぞ。
Maybe I should have asked Natsume about Togo's remains instead.
邪魔したな、ヤギ沼。何か分かったらまた頼むわ。
I drove to Takadanobaba from Kasumigaseki. Once there, I parked right outside the Takashiro clinic. However, I froze up just as I was about to step inside. I really keep my cooler on Toko's remains? That is a good question, bud. Not only that, but can I bear to see them all tampered with? No, it's all part of the autopsy. It's just her job, but...
おや、
Yeah.
時坂藩やあらへんか。
My musings were abruptly interrupted by a familiar voice radiating from 7 o'clock.
どうも、夏目さん。
ちょいと買い物に行っとりましたんえ。
I'm liking Natsume in the new style. I'm liking it. I dig it. Natsume unlocked her clinic as she hoisted a paper bag for emphasis.
何かありました？
奥多摩で見つかった遺体の司法解剖について聞きに来ました。
ああ、あれな。あいにくうちじゃやっとりまへん。
そうなんですか。
I hated how relieved I was to hear that.
骨だけになっとりましたからな。大学でしっかりと調べるみたいですえ。
だとすると、まだかかりそうですね。
せやろな。おいでも、遺族の方がきちんと言っとけば。
It vexed me to no end that I literally didn't have the right to make that request.
上がっていきます。
That's my gesture to the open door.
いえ、これで失礼します。
Coward.
さよですか。ほな、またな。
And then with that, Natsume hopped inside. I went to Shinjuku and dropped by my office. While I didn't actually have any business there, I still needed to check up on the nitwit to make sure he hadn't died of starvation or anything. Oh wait, I haven't actually given him any work to do this week, have I? For a moment I considered he may have been looking for his old friend / cousin of his own volition, only to just as quickly dismiss the notion as uncharacteristic of him. Much to my surprise, I found the office empty. My documents were stacked neatly on the desk while his blanket had been left folded immaculately in the corner. If nothing else, it showed just what a good breeding he'd had. That or maybe just what a slob I was. It was then I noticed an unfamiliar notebook on the desk. The cover read investigation reports. Did he make this? Normally I would have had scruples by reading someone's diary, but reports were a different story. And so I started flipping through it. The page I landed on was dated to last week. Question around Hachiyoji Station. No sightings reported. Question around Tachikawa Station. No sightings reported. Question around Tamagawa Josei Station. No sightings reported. Well, at least someone at this agency is out there doing their job. Unlike a certain piece of shit. But as hard as Masaki was trying, I doubt Naoto Kuroya would be reckless enough to venture into some of the busiest stations in Tokyo.
あれ、時坂さん。
An inaptly relaxed voice nearly sent me jumping out of my skin. Turned around and lo and behold... Maybe it'll grow on me. I ain't gonna lie, dude looks pretty goofy compared to his appearance in 2. In my opinion. There stood Tomoyuki Masuki, my livid employee who'd practically stumbled his way into my service.
まさきお前、調べていたのか。
ええ、何かできることがないかと思って。勝手に見ないでくださいよ。
Masuki snatched the notebook out of my hands.
報告書なんだから目を通す必要があるだろう。
もう少し調べてから報告するつもりだったんですよ。
今日も駅を回っていたのか。
ええ、でも誰も見ていないようですね。赤ん坊連れとか特徴はきちんと伝えているつもりですが。
奴だっ って駅に行けば目撃される可能性が上がることくらい承知しているだろうさ。
そうですよね。じゃあ自分がやっていたことは無駄足だったんですね。
探偵の仕事なんてほとんどは無駄足さ。砂漠に落ちている玉を見つけるようなものだからな。
わかりました。しばらく続けてみます。
移動に使った列車代はちゃんと領収書を切ってもらえよ。
珍しいですね。普段なら自分で払えというのに。
うるせえよ。
Couldn't even be bothered to entertain that with a proper
とに
retort.
かく奴を探すのは当分お前に任せる。
I know I should have been helping too, but I just couldn't whip myself into action no matter how hard I tried.
時坂さんは
I'm gonna go home, jerk off, read a book,
俺は
maybe all at once.
他に調べることがあるからな。
That wasn't technically a lie, even though I did just pull that response right out of my ass. February 2nd. Saw by Moonworld and Kichijoji the next day. Hell yeah.
あら、いらっしゃい。
Hell yeah, she still looks gorgeous. Kyoko was there to greet me like
コー
always.
ヒーもらえるか。
ええ、ちょっと待っててね。
Kyoko turned her back to me. In the meantime, I took a seat at the counter. Kyoko was still moving around as stiffly as a wind-up doll with rusted joints. She did get stabbed. Seems she'd yet to fully recover from the attack last month, even though the hospital had sent her home with a clean bill of health.
なあ、京子。
何？
God damn, getting all up in my face like that. I like it. Kyoko turned around, cradling a coffee pot in her arms.
少し濃いめに頼むわ。
Couldn't think of anything to say to her, so instead I blurted out the first excuse that came to mind.
まだ眠いの？
まあ、そんなところだ。
Kyoko served me a cup of coffee shortly thereafter.
はい、どうぞ。
あ、
I took a sip. It had more of a kick to it than usual, just like I'd asked. Heat and bitterness rippled across my tongue. If there was anything for me to be grateful for, it was Kyoko treating me the same as ever. Just then I noticed a new vase of flowers perched at the edge of the counter.
あれは
退院祝いですって、魚住くんが。わざわざ近くのお花屋さんに電話して頼んだんですって。
You know, I ain't gonna lie, Kyoko looks fucking gorgeous in the new art style. Like, for the most part, everyone else just kind of looks good, right? No real changes. I'm not a big fan of Masuki's change. Everyone else been kind of good. Kyoko, I mean, Kyoko always looked great, but damn. Nah, she's killing it in the new style, I ain't gonna lie. They keep doing these close-ups, and I'm just like, shit, girl, alright, go on.
あいつも豆だな。
In hindsight, I probably should have gotten her something too.
今日のお仕事は？
Kyoko eyed me as she polished a silver spoon. I'll give you a spoon to polish.
人待ちだ。もうすぐここに来るはずだが。
Snuck a glance at the entrance. However, there was no signs of her. Toji? Not that I was in a rush or anything, though. Hell, this meeting wasn't even for work. More pleasure than business, if anything. Not Toji?
じゃあコーヒーとお茶受けも用意しておくわね。
よろしく。
Toji? Picked up my coffee and scooted over to a table at the edge of the cafe. Today's paper was resting right there. Since my companion had yet to show, I decided to skim through it to kill time. From what I could see, there weren't any follow-up articles about Shinzo Mamiya's death. But if what Yaginuma told me was true, there was probably just because there wasn't anything else noteworthy to report about the matter. Eventually, I settled my attention on an article detailing the successful launch of that satellite. When suddenly the chime of a customer filing in caught my attention.
悪いな。
Ah!
呼び出してしまって。
Fuck yeah. Yeah, no, she still looks amazing as ever. Before me was Toji Aoki, the one-armed, silver-haired woman who'd once been a leading officer for a criminal organization. Despite her checkered past, though, she'd put all that behind her and was now living life as a journalist.
構わないさ。あっちは警察に任せてあるからな。
そうか。
Toji didn't pry further.
思いのほか冷静で安心したよ。
冷めてるだけさ。
Took another sip of my lukewarm
マミ
coffee.
や心臓のことが聞きたいんだって。
Serious to the topic at hand before any awkwardness had time to settle in.
昔の事件にお前が深く関わっていたと聞いていたからな。
Toji popped a cigarette into her mouth.
記事にするのか。
いや、ただの興味だ。あ、タバコよかったか？
Doji asked right after pulling out her lighter.
俺は構わんよ。
Slid the ashtray toward her.
悪い。
Doji lit her cigarette and puffed a cloud of smoke at the ceiling.
間宮心臓という男はとにかくどこか常軌を逸していたようだ。俺もそのあたりのことはよく知らないが、随分と人死にが出ている。
空の少女だったか。助手の体を象にしたそうだな。
My mind flashed back to that basement in the Mamiya estate.
芸術のためならば何をしても構わないと考えていたようだ。もっともそれは戦前で、戦後空の少女を作り終えて以降は何も発表していない。
Stopped for a moment when I saw Kyoko approaching with coffee and sponge cake.
お待たせしました。
ありがとう。
Doji accepted the coffee and took a sip of it.
その息子が間宮真司。桂木真か。
間宮真司の場合はそうなる下地があった。
I continued once I was sure Kyoko was safely out of
間
earshot.
宮心臓のいや真司の母親である間宮みゆきによる虐待が原因だった。
Though a whole bunch of other people lost their lives as a result.
その象の方の空の少女の行方はまだ分かっていないということだが。
Is it?
そうだな。間宮心臓の家から回収して司法解剖される寸前に6式に奪われた。逮捕後も
I
一
did
向
not
にあ
even
りかを
remember
白
that
状
that was
し
a
ている。
thing. It's like someone nabbed the body. I guess it would make sense for Rokushiki to do that, but still. But it needed to be found to give Misa Nakahara a proper burial, if nothing else.
この町にはまだ隠れられる場所がいくらでもあるからな。
お前が言うと真実味が増すな。
真実だよ。私のような足を洗った人間でもそういった場所はいくつか知っている。
Doji took a bite of sponge cake.
うまいな、これは。
Goddamn right it's good. Fucking Kyoko made it.
そりゃまあわざわざここで焼いているやつだからな。
Glanced over at the woman in question behind the counter.
まあ、目撃者を見つけるなどして地道に探すしかないのだろうな。
分かっているぞ。
There's just too much out there to find. Normally tracking down stuff like that was where detectives shone, but, well,
俺はどうもそういうのが苦手でな。
I don't wanna.
殺しばかり追っていたからだろ。うせ者探しに定評のある探偵に頼んだらどうだ。
Doji raised an eyebrow and smirked.
あいつだって子育てに忙しいだろう。
There's only one detective I could imagine she was referring to. This was the first I'd heard about him being some modern day Anthony of Padua.
しかし子供。
Thought I'd been the one who brought it up in the first place. It still made me lock up all the same. My mind turned to the baby Naoto Kuroya had whisked away. I had to find her, no matter the cost.
あの子についてはあの場にいた人間しか知らないのだろう。
Doji eyed the counter for a moment.
俺の問題だろうからな。
あまり無理はするなよ。
まだ無理はしてねえよ。
Well, I hadn't even lifted a finger.
まあいい。実のところ、お前より心配なのは真先の方だ。
Doji lit another smoke.
あいつの心配じゃないところなんてないだろう。
雇用主から見たらそうかもしれないが、主に奴の精神
Yeah,
面の問題だ。
homeboy definitely went through it.
ああ、そういうことか。
不安定というか、逆に安定しすぎていると言うべきかもしれないな。
そうだな。
Though maybe the same could be said for me as
あ
well.
いつは精神科に通院していた。六式が逮捕された後も通っ
Masuki likely hadn't had a single session since the incident that triggered our meeting, his failed suicide attempt.
私としては、お前も一度診察を受けた方がいいと思うが。
分かってるさ。
I chugged the rest of my cold coffee, scowling from the flood of bitterness as I answered. Holy shit, that's Italian. Masuki beheld the hustle and bustle around Shinjuku Station all by himself. He was looking for Naori, just like he told Reichi. That wasn't to say his search was limited to this area, though. He planned to search Tokyo from top to bottom. Reichi had told him his work would be a waste of time for the most part. However, Masuki had no other ideas. He was aware that Naori was too clever to venture out into densely populated areas such as these. Or maybe that was exactly what his old friend wanted them to believe, and he was in fact doing exactly that. Whatever the case, Muskie didn't know what the right thing to do was. He didn't believe he could outwit Naori. Perhaps all he was good for was searching for witnesses. Still, at least he'd likely have a much better shot of tracking down Naori if he managed to turn up one or two of those.
すみません。
Muskie called out to a woman strolling by once he'd motivated himself.
こういう人を探しているのですが。
Muskie went on to describe Naori and asked the passerby if she'd seen anyone like that in the last 10 days or so. Unfortunately, the inquiry bore no fruit. In fact, Muskie had no photos of Naori didn't help either. But what weighed heavier on his heart was just how few people had heard of the Blessed Congregation, Naori's former employer. The group had been all over the news last month, yet from the blank stares their name had evoked in many, one would think they'd never existed. It just went to show how little attention people paid matters that didn't directly concern them. True. Life went on with no regard to those suffering in the wake of the incident surrounding the group. He was perfectly aware that didn't mean nobody cared, of course. That was simply the way the world worked, nothing more. Okay, see, when he's got his, like, head turned like that, you know, when he's hitting the, you know, the side profile, it doesn't look too bad. I'm like, yeah, no, that's Muskie right there. Just when he hits that face forward and looks like a Muppet. Muskie leaned against a tall building nearby. His prospects of finding Naori were grim, to say the least. I had a photograph of him. Muskie opened his notebook to a blank page. And later, he began sketching from memory. You are an artist, I did. That is true. Drew a round outline first, then added hair. Muskie nearly laughed once he got a good look at the finished portrait. The result bore not even the slightest resemblance to Naori, perhaps because Muskie wasn't versed in drawing people. This won't be any help at all.
何を描いているのです？
I hate it when random people show up and start whispering in my ears. The abrupt disruption of his own ruminations nearly scared the living daylights out of Muskie. He frantically shut the notebook and looked up, only to find himself under the eye of a girl around Yukari's age.
似顔絵描きさんです。
Clearly, Muskie hadn't closed his book fast enough.
あ、いや、
Muskie was in the midst of denying the girl's postulation when he suddenly noticed what she was carrying. A wooden box full of painting tools. Unlikely for oil paintings at that, judging from the paint stains littering the surface. Oh, wonderful. That was likely my best deduction thus far. What a depressing thought.
実は人を探していてね。写真がないから記憶を頼りに書いてみようとしたんだけど。
Muskie explained the situation to the girl, figuring this still counted as looking for witnesses.
ちょっと待ってください。
The girl set down her bag and produced a sketch pad.
もう一度特徴を教えてもらえます？
ああ。
Muskie gave the girl another rundown of Naori's features.
背は高くて。
The girl started drawing a face on her sketch pad. Yeah? Looks pretty close.
全体的には細いけれど、顎はもう少しがっしりしているかな。
The more the girl corrected her drawing as per Muskie's observations, the more it came to resemble Naori Kuroya's actual face.
うまいもんだね。
このくらい絵を習っていれば。
Yeah. No, I'm not that good. You just kind of suck, dude. The girl humbly shook her head.
そういや、誰かに習ったなんてことはなかったな。
He'd been entirely self-taught, since there hadn't been anyone to show him the ropes back in his hometown.
お兄さんも絵を描くのです。
The girl questioned Muskie without looking away from her work.
昔少しだけね。最近は全く書いていないけれど。
Hence his sorry excuse for a face portrait.
これでいいですか？
The girl put down her pencil and showed Muskie her sketch pad. If he hadn't known any better, he would have thought she'd drawn Naori straight from life.
似ています。
ああ、そっくりだよ。
そうですか。
The girl breathed what sounded like a tiny sigh of relief.
この人。
Her eyes widened slightly as she studied her sketch.
どこでだい？
Can't believe it. An honest-to-God witness.
お正月に。
あの時か。
Muskie's face fell. That was a while before Naori had gone in the lamb.
もっと最近の方が。
そうだね。できればここ10日ほどの目撃情報が欲しいのだけど。
The reporter would make the challenging hunt easier at the very least.
この絵はいただいてもいいかい？
構わないのです。
Muskie filed it away in his notebook once he had her approval.
その人何かあったんです？
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question there, ma'am. Girl's eyes lit up with curiosity. Rather a reasonable reaction given the state of affairs.
古い知り合いだよ。今ちょっと行方がわからなくなっていてね。
Muskie kept the explanation as vague as possible.
どうもありがとう。
久保一恵というのです。
Chie scrutinized Muskie's face a moment later.
なんだ。あ、自分は正木と言って。
Muskie hastily began introducing himself.
お兄さんってまるで探偵さんみたいなのです。
You know too much. Only for his voice to die in his throat when she made that observation. Hold on, what am I so nervous about? After all, there shouldn't be any harm in telling her I really am a detective, should there?
冗談なのです。それでは人探し。
Chie waved before vanishing into the crowds of Shinjuku. Now, Masuki, listen to me, bud. Don't take after your mentor and start falling for teenagers, all right, bud? You can do better than this. I know you can.